My stepson smirked and said, "You're just an outsider. Stay out of our lives." So I transferred the apartment they were living in out of my name and sent their father a message. "Come pick up your heroes." His silence was the best answer he could have given. Don't forget to subscribe and share your experiences below. Let's get started. When my stepson smirked and said, "You're just an outsider. Stay out of our lives," I didn't shout. I didn't flinch. I just stood there, watching him like he was some stranger walking through a house I built with my bare hands. There was no trembling, no heat, just a cool, surgical realization that I was done. I walked into the kitchen and unplugged the router. Walked into the office and froze both of their debit cards. Canceled auto refill for gas, 4 games, for every thoughtless transaction I had been underwriting like a ghost in their pockets. Then I pulled up the property records. The apartment they were living in rent-free under my name, transferred to a shell company I controlled, then to escrow. They'd be out by the end of the month. I texted Trevor, "Come pick up your heroes." He didn't answer. He never does. But this time, his silence was louder than any apology. You don't always know when the final break will come. You spend years telling yourself, next week they'll change. Next year they'll see. You rationalize every slight, every sneer, because you think love, consistent, selfless love, will eventually earn its place. But sometimes love just rots in the corner like meat left out too long. Sometimes the only thing it earns is contempt. 10 years ago, I married Sarah in a courthouse ceremony on a rainy Tuesday. She wore blue, said it was her favorite color because it reminded her of stillness. Her kids stood beside her. Lucas, 12, dressed like a pallbearer, and Ellie, 9, clinging to her mother like the world would slip from under her feet. Their father, Trevor, was already halfway gone. Not legally, not entirely, but spiritually absent in that way only cowards know how to be. Christmas dad. A birthday appearance. A man whose shadow stretched longer than his presence. From day one, I stepped into a house where every picture still had his face in it. Where every drawer had some object that used to belong to him. I paid to replace the windows, but the drafts he left behind never left. I told myself it would pass. That kids needed time. That boys test their boundaries. That daughters cling to the memory of the man they were told to miss. I thought patience could dissolve legacy. That hard work could scrub out the stains of a ghost. So I worked. I picked up the bills. School tuition. Backpacks. Clothes. Ellie's ballet shoes. Replaced every season as her feet grew and grew. Lucas's braces. Lucas's soccer team. Lucas's silence, which I paid for most of all. I drove them to appointments. Showed up to every parent-teacher meeting. I knew their homework schedules better than they did. When Sarah had to work weekends at the hospital, I stayed home, reheated leftovers, helped with science fair projects, and played referee when the house filled with teenage rage. Trevor? He came back twice a year. Always in a newer car than the last. Always with a watch that glinted just right under the porch light. He brought gifts and stories. Took them to Six Flags. Posed for selfies. Posted captions like, "Time with my world globe showing Europe, Africa." The kids loved it. Ate it up like starving dogs licking the scent off an empty plate. He never paid a cent. But somehow he was the real dad. And me? I was the man who told them to clean their rooms. The man who turned off the Xbox when grades dropped. The man who said no when no was needed. You can't compete with mythology. The early years were quieter. Ellie clung to me more than she clung to Trevor. She called me Daddy Mike, sometimes, especially after nightmares. She didn't remember much of the divorce. Didn't remember the shouting. Just the lullaby I hummed to her when Sarah was working nights. She cried when I missed her 3rd grade play. I swore I never would again. Lucas was harder. Closed off. Distant. I gave him space. Thought time would earn his trust. I bought him a punching bag. Taught him how to drive. Took him fishing even though I hated the water. We sat in silence for hours, and I thought that silence meant peace. I was wrong. When Lucas turned 17, he stopped saying my name. Not in anger, just in indifference. He spoke to Sarah, answered her texts, ignored mine, called me him when talking to his friends. I asked Sarah about it once. She laughed, said it was normal. Teenage boys are like that. I accepted that lie because it hurt less than the truth. The cracks came slowly, not like a collapse, more like erosion. A small chip here, a quiet insult there, missed birthdays, eye rolls, silent dinners. Sarah always filled the space with cheerful noise, as if her laughter could drown out the resentment. I remember one Christmas. I had worked double shifts for weeks, paid for everything, gifts, food, even the decorations. Trevor showed up uninvited, wearing a blazer, bringing a drone for Lucas and a necklace for Ellie. Everyone laughed. Everyone smiled. I stood in the kitchen carving ham, while he told a story about some beach trip with his new girlfriend. Sarah didn't stop him. The kids didn't look at me once. That night, Sarah said, he just wants to be part of their lives. I said, I've given them mine. She didn't reply. It stayed like that for years. Me giving, them taking, Sarah balancing, always balancing, as if love was a scale you could keep even by staying still. But the smirk on Lucas's face that afternoon, the one that came with the sentence that split me in two, that was different. That was not immaturity. That was not confusion. That was cruelty. Measured. Practiced. You're just an outsider, he said. Stay out of our lives. Ellie laughed. She looked down when I caught her eye. But she didn't apologize. Sarah said nothing. And in that silence, I heard every decision she had ever made. That's when I knew it was done. Not the way a man knows he's angry, but the way a man knows the sun is setting and there's no light left to wait for. So I walked into the den, unplugged the router, set the cables on the kitchen table without a word, walked into my office, opened every financial app, every bill, every tab that held a piece of their futures, and started cutting the wires. The cards? Cancelled. The accounts? Locked. The apartment deed? Transferred. Every thread they had wrapped around me. I burned it. I left the receipts on the table. Sarah came in an hour later, saw the bills, saw the router, asked, "What happened?" I said, "You made your choice." She said, "They're kids." I said, "So was I when I started paying for them." I didn't sleep that night, not because I was uncertain, because I was grieving, not for them, but for the man I used to be, the man who believed love could buy loyalty, the man who kept showing up for a family that never showed up for him. That man died in the space between Lucas's smirk and Sarah's silence, and I buried him myself. They say time heals, that if you keep showing up, keep loving hard enough, eventually the walls come down. I believed that. For years, I carried that belief like a stone in my gut. Heavy, grinding, but necessary. Because what's a man supposed to do when the people he sacrifices for won't meet his eyes? He keeps going. I woke early, made breakfast, packed lunches, fixed the toilet when it leaked, painted Ellie's room purple because she said it helped her sleep, drove Lucas to soccer at 7 a.m. in the freezing rain. I clapped from the sidelines while his father sat dry in another state. I paid the fees, bought the cleats, took the team photo because no one else showed up. Ellie called me Dad until she turned 13. Then it was just Mike. I told myself it didn't matter. A name is just a sound. But when you hear your own children call another man Dad on a FaceTime call, when they smile wider for him in 5 minutes than they have for you in 5 years, you start to understand just how much that sound costs. Still, I didn't stop. Couldn't. I paid for everything. Every broken phone screen. Every late night craving for takeout. Every school trip. Every birthday party. Every whispered request that came through Sarah. Like I was a vending machine that only operated with her voice. I never said no. I thought giving was how you built trust. That consistency could stand in for love. I was wrong. The summer Lucas turned 15, Trevor returned. Not in a whisper this time. Not in a random weekend visit. He came back loud. With money. With swagger. A brand new SUV that took up half our driveway. A watch that probably cost more than our rent. A laugh that seemed too big for his lungs. And the kids? They melted. He took them to dinner. Posted pictures online. Hashtags like hashtag blessed, hashtag family first, hashtag daddy days. Ellie wore the necklace he gave her like a badge. Lucas came back from their first trip with new shoes, a new phone, and a smirk that stayed for days. Trevor never asked how they'd been. Never asked who'd paid for their braces or the summer camps or the therapy when Ellie started pulling out her own hair in 7th grade. He just showed up, smiled wide, handed them things, and left before the weight of real parenting could land on his shoulders. Every time he left, the house felt colder. They came back different, sharper, more dismissive. Lucas started correcting me. Dad says this. Dad says that. As if quoting him made it law. Ellie rolled her eyes when I reminded her to do homework. Trevor says school doesn't matter unless it makes you money. Sarah just smiled. They're excited he's back. Let them have that. Let them have that. Like I hadn't been handing them everything for a decade. Like I was some substitute teacher filling in until the real one returned. The house changed. Conversations moved around me instead of through me. Dinner felt like a show I hadn't bought tickets for. They laughed at Trevor's jokes from the weekend, quoting him word for word. They asked if he could take them on a real vacation. Lucas started calling our home Mom's place. Ellie said things like, my parents, when talking about Sarah and Trevor, as if I were a neighbor renting the guest room. Still, I tried. I showed up, paid, stayed quiet, tried to find cracks in their armor. I bought Ellie a keyboard when she said she wanted to try music. Drove her to lessons every Tuesday. Sat outside in the car, working through spreadsheets on my laptop because I couldn't afford to lose billable hours. She quit 3 months later. Not really my thing. Trevor bought her a guitar the next week. She carried it around the house like a trophy. Lucas wanted to learn coding. I bought the courses, signed him up for workshops, even got a friend to offer mentorship. He lost interest before he finished the first module. Trevor gave him a drone instead. More fun, he said. Lucas agreed. Every gesture I made was swallowed by a bigger, flashier one. And Sarah? She watched. She said little. Smiled when it was safe to. Shrugged when the tension rose. Her silence was not neutrality. It was betrayal dressed in passivity. I remember one night, late, Ellie had left her math homework on the kitchen counter. I sat down with it, started solving the problems she'd gotten wrong. When she came in the next morning, I showed her the notes. She looked at them, then at me and said, I'll ask Dad. He's better at this. She meant Trevor, the man who hadn't shown up to a single parent-teacher meeting, who didn't know what grade she was in. I didn't respond. I just went to work. But something shifted that day. A hairline fracture that would split wide soon. I started keeping records. Not out of spite, out of clarity. I needed to see it all in black and white. What I'd paid. What I'd provided. What I'd built while being told I didn't belong. I tallied the groceries, the rent, the utilities, the vacations, the school fees, the car maintenance, the therapy, the health insurance, the gifts, the clothes, the gas money, the time, the hours spent doing what no one else would. It added up fast. In 8 years, I had spent nearly $300,000 on 2 children who didn't share my name, who told me, with their eyes and their silence and eventually their words, that I was not, and never would be, their father. Still, I believed. That's the sickness. That's the part no one talks about. You can know you're being used. You can feel the disrespect in every interaction. But something in you, some ancient instinct, keeps hoping. Maybe next year. Maybe after graduation. Maybe when they're adults. You become addicted to hope. And hope turns to delusion. Sarah and I fought more during those years. Quiet fights. The kind with long silences and slammed drawers. I told her I felt invisible. She told me I was being sensitive. I told her the kids didn't respect me. She told me to be patient. I asked if she saw what I saw. She said, they're just kids. She never defended me. Not once. Not when Lucas mocked my job. Not when Ellie laughed at my rules. Not when Trevor showed up drunk one Sunday and left tire marks on the lawn. She kept the peace. But peace built on my silence wasn't peace. It was quiet tyranny. The final cracks came slowly. Lucas came home drunk one night. Threw up on the porch. I cleaned it up before Sarah could see. Told him we'd talk in the morning. He said, "You're not my dad. Don't try to parent me." Ellie skipped class. Lied about it. I found out through the school's automated emails. She said, "Dad already knows." He said it's no big deal. She meant Trevor. Again, I brought it up to Sarah. She said, "Don't push them." So I didn't. But inside something hardened. You can only offer your hand so many times before you learn to clench a fist. And then came the meeting. The family ambush. A Sunday evening. We were all in the living room. Sarah on the couch. Lucas in the chair he never offered to guests. Ellie curled on the rug with her phone in hand. I thought it was just another quiet evening. Until Lucas looked up and said, "We need to talk." He spoke like a judge, not a son. Ellie nodded. Sarah stayed silent. Lucas said, "You've been trying to take Dad's place. It's not cool. You owe him an apology." I stared at him, at his face, at the twisted arrogance in his voice, at the shadow of a man who never stayed, standing tall in the boy who never saw me. Ellie added, "It's like you think being here makes you our father." I looked at Sarah. She didn't speak. Not a word. Not even a glance in my direction. I said, "All right." Lucas smirked. Ellie went back to her phone. Sarah exhaled, like something had been resolved. But inside I was done. Done pretending. Done bleeding. Done waiting. That night, I stayed up late, opened every document, every bill, every record, and started preparing my exit. Not from the house, but from the role they refused to honor. The man who pays for everything, who sacrifices everything, and still gets told he's nothing? He dies quietly. But when he rises, he doesn't come back to save anyone. He comes back to collect. The next morning, I woke early, before the house stirred. I sat in the quiet, staring at the contracts and bills and papers spread across the kitchen table. For once, the weight of it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a shield. I wasn't doing this for revenge. Not exactly. But it sure felt like a kind of justice. It had been 10 years of giving, 10 years of sacrifice, 10 years of playing the fool because I believed in them. In her. And now the scales had tipped. And I wasn't going to hold them up anymore. I reviewed every document, every receipt. The tuition payments, the rent, the utilities, the groceries, the travel. I added it all up. Each one was a weight, a promise I'd kept without ever being asked to. But not anymore. I wasn't just a provider. I wasn't their ATM. I was a man whose love had been ignored, whose sacrifices had been dismissed. And I was tired of it. I shut down their college funds, the savings accounts, everything I had been quietly padding for their futures. Gone. I closed the door on their future as I had known it. The lines were drawn. The well was dry. By noon, I had already spoken to the bank, transferring everything into my own name. Their apartment, no longer mine. Their future, now a question mark. Their stability, shattered. I took my time as I always did, making sure every detail was in place. It wasn't the first time I'd had to deal with things like this. But now, there was no uncertainty, no hesitation. I knew what had to be done. That evening, around 7:30, when the air was thick with the sounds of the house settling, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Not anymore. But when I opened the door, Trevor was standing there, his hands in his pockets, a feigned smile on his face. I could smell the cologne before he even spoke. "Mike," he said, like he was trying to remember my name, like I was the awkward guest in his own home. "You know, the kids have been asking for you. I was hoping we could talk, settle some things." I didn't let him finish. I walked right past him without a word, heading for the front yard where his car sat, idling in the driveway. When he caught up, I turned to face him, my hands folded in front of me. He still wore that same smile. A smile that came easy when there was no responsibility. No weight. No consequences. "Here's the thing, Trevor," I said, my voice calm but firm, the kind of calm that comes after a storm has already passed. "I'm done being the safety net. I'm done carrying your kids when you vanish every time it gets hard. He blinked, caught off guard. What the hell are you talking about? I motioned for him to look around. The house is mine. The apartment? Gone. The bank accounts? Frozen. The college funds? Closed. I'm not their father. I'm just a man who's been paying for their lives while you pop in and out, flashing cash and pretending like you give a damn. His eyes hardened, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked a little scared. He shifted on his feet, like he wasn't sure whether to fight me or back off. But I wasn't finished. You're their father, I continued, stepping forward so that there was no space left between us. I've been everything else. But now you're going to step up, because I've had enough. He opened his mouth to say something, but I cut him off. You want to be their hero? You want to play the part you abandoned years ago? Then you can pay for it. You can take over everything I've been doing while you were gone. No more sitting on the sidelines while I do all the work. I'm not paying for their college. Not for their rent. Not for their damn food. Not a single dime. He swallowed hard, his gaze flicking between me and the front door, like he might just turn around and leave. But he didn't. He stood there, like a man who knew exactly what this cost him. I'm sorry, but this isn't your call anymore. Trevor finally muttered, his face turning red. You can't just shut them out like this. They need you. No, Trevor, I said, stepping closer until I was almost nose to nose with him. They needed me when you were gone. They needed me when you couldn't even be bothered to call them. They needed me when I was the one showing up, while you were too busy playing the part of a father without doing a single thing to earn it. And now that they're old enough to see what you've been, they're running to you for what? I paused, letting the words sink in, letting him feel the weight of them. For your approval? I shook my head. They're not kids anymore. They're old enough to see that you're not a father. You're just a man with a title and no substance. I left him standing in the yard, his face twisted in disbelief, and went inside. I could hear his voice muffled from behind the door, but I didn't care. He could argue all he wanted. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about what he thought. It was about me drawing a line they had ignored for too long. The next morning, the consequences started to hit. It began with the letters, the ones that came addressed to Lucas and Ellie. First, the school's tuition overdue notices. Then the landlord's demand for overdue rent. Then Ellie's phone got cut off. One by one, the threads I had so carefully woven into their lives started to unravel. At breakfast, Lucas finally spoke. His voice was thin, shaky, like a thread pulled too tight. What the hell did you do? I didn't look up. I kept eating my eggs, my coffee cold, the kitchen filled with the sounds of their panic. You'll have to talk to your father about that, I said simply. I'm not paying for you anymore. For a moment, the room was still. Then Lucas exploded. You can't just cut us off. You owe us. We're your family. I met his eyes, unblinking. No, I'm not your family. I'm not your backup. I'm not your safety net anymore. You told me I wasn't your dad. You were right, so I've stopped acting like it. Now it's your real dad's turn to take responsibility. Ellie opened her mouth to protest, but I silenced her with a look. Your real dad is back now. Let him take care of you. I watched as they floundered, watched as they realized what they had been doing all these years. Taking and taking, never giving anything in return. They had been using me, while I had built their future on the belief that one day, they'd see what I'd done for them. But they never would. Sarah didn't speak either. She watched from across the table, her eyes wide, her mouth shut. She knew deep down this was the end, that the man who had bent for years had finally straightened his back and drawn a line that would never be crossed again. That night, the phone calls came. Lucas, desperate. Ellie, embarrassed. Sarah, crying. They all begged me to fix it, to pay the tuition, to get the rent paid, to make sure they had what they needed. But I stayed silent. I had already made my choice. The truth is, respect isn't something you can demand with threats. It's something you earn through your actions. And I had earned mine the hard way, by showing up every time they didn't, by giving everything I had and watching them take it without once saying thank you. But not anymore. They left 3 days later. Sarah packed quietly, like she'd done it before, efficient, detached. No tantrums, no drawn-out speeches, just the rhythmic shuffle of bags being zipped, drawers emptied, lives undone. I watched from the hallway, not helping, not stopping her, just watching. She didn't look at me until the end. When the boys were in the car, Lucas in the front seat, arms crossed like a man wrongly accused. Ellie in the back, headphones in, face to the window, Sarah turned. She held a duffel in one hand, her wedding ring still on the other. "You're really letting this go?" she asked. I didn't blink. "No, I'm letting you go." She shook her head. "You're punishing them because they hurt your pride." "No," I said. "I'm punishing myself for staying this long." That was it. No dramatic exit. No final embrace. She walked out the front door and closed it softly behind her, like she didn't want to wake something. But the thing she feared had already stirred long ago. And it wasn't rage. It was clarity. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. The house creaked differently without them. The fridge stayed full longer. The power bill dipped. The air changed. I sat in the stillness, listening for footsteps that would never return. Voices that once filled the air with dismissive laughter, complaints, demands. For the first time in a decade, there was no one asking me for anything. But I didn't feel peace. Not yet. Peace doesn't come after war. It waits behind the wreckage, stubborn and silent, until you crawl your way to it with bloody hands. Took months. At first, there were messages. From Sarah, then Ellie, then Lucas. Sarah was the first to crack. 2 weeks in, she sent a photo. Lucas standing outside a car wash, soaked through, shirt clinging to his shoulders, a forced smile on his face. He got a job. He's learning responsibility. Maybe you were right. I didn't reply. Ellie's came later. A text. Just one line. "I miss how things used to be." No punctuation. Like she didn't know if it was a question, a statement, or a test. I didn't respond to that one either. Then came Lucas. 3 months gone. A voicemail. He sounded tired. "Hey, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I wanted to say I get it now. Okay, I get what you did. Why you did it. I didn't back then. But I do now. And I'm sorry." He paused. "If you don't call back, I understand. I wanted you to know." That one stayed on my phone. I never deleted it. But I never played it again either. Once was enough. Sarah tried once more around Christmas. Said they wanted to visit. Said they wanted to talk. I told her no. They'd had a decade to talk. The house was quiet that winter. But not lonely. There's a difference. Loneliness is a craving. Quiet is a choice. I found someone new. Her name is Emma. No baggage. No shadows. No children telling me I'm not enough. She laughs at my bad jokes. Listens without waiting to correct. Touches me like I matter, not like I'm a fixture, a paycheck, a barrier. We don't talk about the past. She knows I came from something broken. She never asks how deep the cracks go. Sometimes we sit in silence, watching the rain streak down the windows, and I realize how foreign peace had become. How long I had lived without it, mistaking exhaustion for fulfillment. I don't keep photos of Sarah or the kids. Not out of bitterness. Just clarity. They're not mine. They never were. I was a rented scaffold, meant to hold them up while they figured out how to stand. And when they thought they could balance without me, they tore me down. Let them rebuild with what's left. I still see them sometimes. Grocery store, gas station, a mall once. Lucas behind a register, eyes flicking up and locking with mine for just a second before looking away. Ellie with friends, laughing too loud, voice sharp with performance. Sarah alone once, in a parking lot, holding a bag of takeout like it was heavier than it should have been. We never speak. We don't have to. Their faces say enough. Not regret. Not apology. Just recognition. The slow dawning of a truth they never believed would come home. That when you burn someone long enough, they stopped putting out the fire. I wonder sometimes what story they tell now. To friends? To themselves? Do they say I abandoned them? That I was too proud? Too cold? Or do they tell the truth? That I was a man who gave everything and asked only for respect in return? That I loved them like my own until they made it clear I wasn't? That I stayed long after I should have left? That I was silent until I wasn't? I don't expect answers. I don't expect peace from them. I have it already. My new life is small. Intentionally so. A rented cottage. A garden I tend myself. A porch swing that creaks just enough to remind me I'm still here. No noise. No slamming doors. No half-heard insults behind bedroom walls. Just me. And the knowledge that I finally chose myself. Sometimes people ask, coworkers, old friends, Emma's sister, what happened? I don't give details. I just say, I used to have a family. And then I say, but they didn't want me. That usually ends the questions. Because everyone understands that, in their own way, the ache of being unwanted, the cold realization that no matter how much you give, you can't force someone to see your worth. So I'll ask you now, whoever's listening, was I wrong? Was I cruel for cutting them off? For forcing them to face the reality they'd buried under my generosity? For letting their words, "You're just an outsider," become the law I finally lived by? Or was it the only way left to teach them that love is not a leash and sacrifice isn't a debt owed forever? Would you have endured it longer? Would you have stayed? Or would you have done what I did? Let the silence answer for you.